in modern times. I think for some years we've actually been living under an illusion. We've not been prepared to face up to just how much of an economic mess we're genuinely in. As we slip down the global league tables, we kid ourselves. Well, it's okay. We've got GDP growth. But there wouldn't have been any GDP growth over the course of the last few years if it wasn't for mass migration on a scale hitherto never even contemplated, and of course, excess government borrowing. That is all that has kept GDP figures up. And indeed, I think we can argue very strongly that on an individual basis, mass migration has made the average Briton poorer. You take a year like 2024, a record level of people coming into the country, and GDP per capita falling. And of course, the productivity problem, well, there's nothing new there. We've been suffering from poor productivity going back for the best part of 20 years. We convinced ourselves that by importing masses of cheap, unskilled foreign labour, that somehow that would be good for our economy. Well, it was good for the wage bills of big companies in the short term, but catastrophic when it came to training and education for our own workforce. And when it comes to the public sector, who still seem to be hooked on the idea that working from home somehow is good for productivity, well, we see the disastrous results, and this is something that Danny Kruger, on our behalf, has started work on already. But the one subject we really don't discuss, at least the Conservative and Labour parties don't discuss, is the level of national debt. In fact, even last week, the leader of the Conservative Party was saying, in office, we cut the deficit for 14 years. Well, cutting the deficit is a very different thing to cutting debt when you're still running borrowing in certainly at peacetime levels, unlike anything ever seen before. They may try to wash their hands and run away from it, but our national debt increased by over 2.5 times during those 14 years. And now it's accelerating. Now it's accelerating in the most extraordinary way. The OBR predictions for the year going back just before the general election was that we'd borrow 77 billion in the year. That estimate is now 130 billion and rising with each and every month. Our debt has risen faster than any other comparable Western country. In fact, in the last 20 years, our debt-GDP ratio is up by nearly 60%. We are doing worse on debt than any of our competitors, and that includes Eurozone countries who are in other deep, deep trouble. Our debt repayments are over 100 billion a year. They're over the level of our defence budget, and the markets are getting nervy. We've seen, my own view is that in 2 budgets' time, the markets will actually force the Chancellor into what will be a genuine austerity budget, at which point the left in the Labour Party won't buy it, and it's why I still stand by my prediction that there will be a general election caused by economic collapse that will happen in 2027. And just look at the pace, the rapid pace that we continue to deindustrialize. It's all going. Chemicals, refining, cement, heavy engineering, steel. We're losing literally all of it. Cars, and China, the beneficiary in almost every single sector. Why? Because for ideological reasons, we have chosen to have the most expensive industrial energy prices in the world. As for benefits, well, the bill this year has ballooned to over 300 billion. That is more than the cost of the National Health Service and defence added up together. So things aren't happening, and work isn't even paying. Our million lowest paid workers would all be better off if they claim to have mild anxiety. That is the level of mess we're in. One of my own great frustrations is that Brexit has been squandered. The opportunity to sensibly deregulate, the opportunity to become competitive globally, all of that has been squandered. And the worst thing is that regulations and the way regulators behave with British business is now worse than it was at the time of the Brexit referendum vote, and I apply that with knowledge from everything through the financial services industry to the fishing industry. Now, we believe that the fundamental problem behind so much of this, and yes, of course, there are global trends, yes, of course, these things are factors, but that there is a fundamental problem at the heart of the way this country is run. It's the people that are actually doing it. We're run by a group of human rights lawyers, not entrepreneurs. Virtually nobody on the front bench has ever taken a risk, ever borrowed money, ever set up a business, ever had to meet that monthly or weekly, depending what you do, payroll. There is no understanding at all. The disconnect between the conversations in Westminster and, frankly, in much of the media too, and what is happening in the real economy is a gaping chasm. Well, I have to tell you, it's even worse when you think about who runs the departments. Oh, let's put a minister in charge of railways, shall we? They can oversee HS2. They've never worked in railways. They've no knowledge of railways. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. And yet, we managed to have 18 rail ministers in the space of 14 years. And this applies in department after department. People whose only qualification is to be a member of Parliament. As if that's enough. As if that's enough to give a lead, to give a guide over all the things that really matter in our life. Now, if we had a Parliament made up of more experienced people from a broader range of life, that might be okay. But the current convention that both parties stick with just simply doesn't work. In fact, frankly, you think about it, it really is a farce, isn't it? You're put in charge of a big department, and then after 14 months, when you've just about got your table, Keir Starmer, or whoever else it might be, decides to reshuffle you. And so my promise is that reform will not just think differently, but reform will do differently. We will sweep away these outdated conventions. We will become the most pro-business, pro-entrepreneurship government that has been seen in this country in modern times. We'll bring into government, as advisors or ministers, people with real business expertise in their own sector. And we will signal what we hope and believe and what we know we need to be a change of attitude in this country. A change of attitude towards hard work. A change of attitude towards making money. A change of attitude towards success. And I would like to think this would begin in our schools, that we'd have more national champions, that we'd take people who'd come from nothing and become successes and make them heroes, make them role models for younger people to follow. Because believe me, that is very, very badly needed indeed. And perhaps it's appropriate that this speech is being given in this magnificent old banking hall right here in the heart of the City of London. Now, it's a place that I know incredibly well, having spent much of my working life here, and generations of my family before me that worked here. It is a very special place because it symbolizes what is still, despite everything, Britain's biggest industry. We never talk about it. Parliament rarely debates it. Financial services are Britain's biggest industry. But what sad decline we are currently in. We have an EU rule book that is almost entirely in place. And that is interpreted by massively overzealous regulation. The costs of doing business in London, the costs of doing business in our financial services industry are now simply too high. And we're losing business to places all over the world, New York, the Far East, you name it. There is, of course, one booming sector here, though. That is HR and compliance. And Richard Tice and I were talking about this earlier. The FCA now incredibly have 5,000 staff. It was 2,000 staff when I left the city just over 20 years ago. And still we carry on with our outdated practices. We still have stamp duty on share transactions and wonder why IPOs and stock trading in London is in such serious state. We have an FCA keen now to push a diversity agenda, as if diversity in the city is what matters. Well, when I worked here, it didn't matter what religion you were. It didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter what class you were. It didn't matter what color you were. When I worked in the city, it was based on, are you good enough? It was based on being a meritocracy. And that coincided, I think, with London being at the most dominant position in financial services that it's been certainly in modern times. And then we have the banking industry. Not necessarily always been my favorites over the course of the last few years. But they, of course, are forced to implement 4 major European Union money laundering directives, all, of course, put in place with the very, very best of intentions, but that has led to the debanking of hundreds of thousands of individuals and tens of thousands of businesses across this country through no fault of their own, at the same time as the Turkish barbershops proliferate along with the cash car washes right across our country. Our regulators are using sledgehammers to miss the nut. It's just not working. And with the banks not able to act as they should, it's led to the growth of secondary lending, that market exploding, and something which I predict will come back to bite us very, very hard, as it did decades ago. And we've totally ignored the whole new world out there. Folks, it's happening. We're being left behind. There's a global boom in the trade in digital assets, in the use of stable coins, in the usage and investment in all forms of cryptocurrency. We've literally turned our backs on it, both the Bank of England and the FCA being guilty of this. The reason the city succeeded for hundreds of years is that it innovated, it took risk, it saw what the future direction of markets and consumer and customer and commercial demand would be. And we have done absolutely none of it. And frankly, I believe it's a disaster. We should be leading the world in these 21st century businesses. So our aim would be to sensibly deregulate a rule book that was written for the European Union, not written for the City of London, to think globally and to have a much more open debate with the Bank of England. It seems that Parliament thinks, oh, the Bank of England have got independence. Well, they've got independence over monetary policy. They don't have independence over fiscal policy. And it was Richard Tice that pointed out 18 months ago the vast sums of money unnecessarily being paid in interest to banks. And now we've moved to quantitative tightening. Well, they're on course to lock in losses of £150 billion. This has a major fiscal impact on this country. I haven't heard Rachel Reeves talk about it once, which, given she was 10 years a very senior economist over there, I must say I find very, very surprising, and a total rethink of what the FCA is. Markets need sensible regulation that users can trust, and you know something? They don't need a whole lot more than that. And don't forget, when I talk about the city, I'm not just talking about here and Canary Wharf. I'm not just talking about Mayfair. I'm not just talking about a few very high earners. I'm talking about an industry that employs hundreds and thousands of people in every major town and every major city in this country. That is how fundamentally important it is. The whole economy must encourage innovation. We must encourage ambition, and yes, dare I say it, risk-taking. Free markets work because people take risks. And if it goes wrong, it's not the job of governments to bail them out. It's the job of their shareholders and their bondholders to lose all of their stake. And we need so much more than that. But to be that kind of economy, we have to have the right people in our country. That breed of people that will take astonishing risk. That breed of people who'll give up their lives dedicated to a particular project that they wish to succeed. And the numbers on that aren't looking very good. The exodus is real. An estimated 16,500 very rich people will leave this country this year. But a total of about 80,000 people will leave this year seeking jobs, seeking work, seeking opportunity elsewhere around the world. And yes, many of our brightest, youngest, most ambitious people have simply had enough. We're living through a wealth drain, but we're also living again through a late 1970s style brain drain. And we intend to reverse all of that. The and this is unpopular. You talk about this, oh, you can't just talk about rich people. Well, I'll tell you in a moment why we need to. The non-dom tax changes started, of course, by George Osborne, accelerated by Jeremy Hunt, finished off by Rachel Reeves, is a self-induced act of financial stupidity. These people pay their UK taxes. These people employ a lot of people. These people invest in British businesses and British industries. These people are the biggest spenders in the country. But off they go. Milan welcomes them with open arms, as has Lisbon over the course of the last few years. Athens now doing the same. Dubai, a 250,000 Britons. 250,000 Britons now living in Dubai alone. And that's why we've introduced the idea of the Britannia card. A one-off payment for non-doms to come back, settle here, and pay all the relevant tax on their UK income. The same is true of those that are wealthy with assets. They're fleeing. They're scared of wealth taxes. But what they're even more scared of is retrospective tax changes. And it's happened. All through the 90s, I ran my own company. I put money aside every year. I didn't take the family to Barbados. I didn't buy the kind of cars I'd have liked. I put money aside. I thought, well, that's there for a pension, and if I snuff it, it's there for the family. That is now subject to inheritance tax. People are scared of retrospective taxation, and even scared now of the idea of an exit tax. But perhaps the biggest disaster are young professionals who are caught in the £100,000 a year tax trap, and young entrepreneurs who want to get on. They're leaving, and we want them back in this country. And this hard left socialist dogma that it's popular to tax the rich, that the rich won't move, they'll stay and pay more, that, I'm afraid, has infected virtually the entirety of our political class, and it's wrong. So let me make it clear. I want as many high-earning people as possible living in this country and paying as much tax as they legally have to. Because if the rich leave and the rich don't pay tax, then the poorer in society will all have to pay more tax. It's as simple as that, and what we're doing is crazy. And we need those people back, although I have to accept that coming back into London will need not just sensible tax rates, not just a government they fear, it'll need law and order on London's streets to be sorted out, something that Mayor Khan appears to be oblivious to, but is given by some now as another reason for leaving. London, the capital city of Britain, in which you're too scared to wear a watch walking down the street. Right at the heart of what we intend to do to reindustrialize Britain, using the fact we have rather greater knowledge and we're not stuck to dogma in a way the other parties were, has to be to deal with the energy industry. It's as if a new religion overtook the Commons in Blair's time. It was reinforced by Call Me Dave, Vote Blue, Go Green. We then saw Theresa May put net zero into law without even having a vote on the floor of the House of Commons. It wasn't needed because everybody agreed. And now, of course, we have Ed Miliband, whose fanaticism has taken things to a whole new level. Well, he's in competition with Boris, who wanted us to be the Saudi Arabia of wind. Somehow they all seem to think they're saving the planet. The truth is, what they're actually doing is they are exporting carbon dioxide emissions to manufacturers in companies that operate under lower environmental standards. And just look what it's done to the price. And you'll hear evasion after evasion about the genuine cost of renewable, intermittent, unreliable, renewable energy. But our electricity prices are 4 times that of the United States of America, double that of most of our European competitors. And we've done this to ourselves. It is complete and utter madness. You can have as much solar and as much wind as you want. But frankly, the grid that we have, without spending £2 to £3 trillion updating it, cannot cope with that intermittent energy, which is why we now pay wind turbines to turn off when there is too much wind. The lunatic cost of net zero is continuing deindustrialization. 3 or 4 more years of this, there'll be very little manufacturing left in Britain at all, believe me. And when you think about it, it's really quite mad, isn't it? Because we're not just seeing the closure of our refineries and everybody else, who, for many cases, energy contributes 40% of their overall bill. But we're even conning ourselves now. The Prime Minister talks about AI. We're going to be an AI centre. Oh, no, we're not. Because the new energies, the new industries, use more energy than the old, heavy manufacturing industries. If we want to be involved with data centres, with crypto, we're going to need to use more energy than we've ever done before. And even with this massive amount of expenditure that we've put through subsidy and much else into wind, for example, there were days in January this year when we were importing 25% of our energy, and it was coming from Norway, across the other side of the North Sea, and it was coming from Belgium and from Holland. At some point on the current course, energy won't just be expensive, but the lights actually will go out. So we will scrap all net zero subsidies. We will bring down the cost of energy. We will get rid of the insane North Sea taxes put on by Jeremy Hunt and then a bit added on the top by Rachel Reeves. Let's get the North Sea operating. Let's have a look at some of the new onshore gas fields that have been found in this country. That will produce tens of thousands of well-paid jobs. And we've given notice already to the renewables industry that the current insane AR7 round of wind auctions, where it would appear that Ed Miliband is happy to lock in for the next 20 years prices that are 30, maybe 40 or 50% higher than the current already exorbitant price. We've given notice to those companies that if we're in government, we will scrap those contracts. Longer term, we believe as a party in nuclear energy, but not the way the current non-businessmen and women in government and our administrations administer it. Just have a look at Sizewell, have a look at Hinkley Point, have a look at ballooning cost, have a look at time delay, and look to South Korea. South Korea do nuclear energy with no concessions to safety at 25% of the cost that the British do. Yes, there'll be obstacles with planning and much else, but we absolutely have to do this for our future. Our current politicians are not good enough. Our current politicians don't understand business. Our current politicians don't understand money. Just look at the continuing farce of HS2 to understand just how useless they really are. And we will, if we win that next election, bring in seasoned professionals, good not just at managing money, but with expertise in their own industry. We will bring in private sector specialist knowledge. Of that, there is no question. And generally on business, and I saw this in Brussels, and I'm seeing this too in Westminster, that government only listens to big business. It only listens, in fact, in most cases, to multinationals that aren't really British companies at all. They're the ones that have the ear of business. I guess they're the ones that provide the tickets for Wimbledon, the dinners, and all the rest of it. There is a huge ignored sector in this country, a sector who are the genuine engine for growth in the UK economy, a sector we cannot do without if we're to turn round the current dismal state of the British economy. They are rarely talked about. They are ignored, but they are put upon. Just think of the 30% increase that Mr. Hunt brought in for corporation tax, stifling reinvestment. Just think of this government saying their annual returns now must be quarterly returns with added bureaucracy and added costs. Yet the completely forgotten part of the British economy are the 5.6 million men and women that run small businesses, act as directors, or organise their lives as sole traders. They feel unwanted in almost every single way, and yet they're really important. 60% of employment in the private sector is provided by those 5.6 million small companies. They've been hammered by national insurance rules over the course of the last year, especially those working in hospitality and sectors such as that. And they are embattled by IR35 regulations designed by the Treasury and weak Conservative chancellors who assume that everyone out there who isn't working for a big firm is some kind of crook. Well, I'm sorry, but the IR35 rules are ridiculous. They're stifling innovation. They even drive some in their 50s just to throw their hands up and go into early retirement. We will be the party of small business. We will be the party of risk takers. And look, there is a fundamental, I think, misunderstanding in many, many ways about what business really is. It's as if, well, you're either for business in politics or you're for the worker in politics. It is a fundamental misunderstanding, frankly, at every level. Thriving businesses are good for their employees. And something that I don't think anybody on the front benches would even understand is that small businesses very often treat their employees as well as they would treat their own family. You know, I went through times of having to pay monthly payroll